Well, welcome again to another segment of the Grassy Knoll on this October 2nd, 2006. We have with us today, and the never-ending struggle to try to get more people on to apprise listeners and others about the dangers that are out there medically, even when you're being told that they're good for you. And the gentleman that's on with us today is Dr. David Kennedy. He is a dentist who has sunk his teeth fully into the issue of fluoride and how it is not good for us, as we are being told, and it is extremely bad for us. So, coming from us on the left coast, Dr. Kennedy, thanks very much for being with us.
I'm glad to be there.
All right. First of all, I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear that a dentist comes down on the side of fluoride is not a good thing. Can you tell us the odyssey that you went through to come to that epiphany?
Well, it was actually through the mercury odyssey. I got into the issue of mercury fillings and joined the Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology. I had a patient back in the late 70s. Had a patient that recovered from almost a 20-year bout with multiple sclerosis. And when I took her mercury fillings out, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't do it right or anything else, but she still recovered. And so I started looking at toxicology. No dentist has ever been trained in toxicology. It's a course that's not offered in dental school, but I had a background in biochemistry. So there's a new group that forms called the International Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology, and so I joined that. And we started looking at, with science, at the biology of the materials that are used in dentistry. And the first two things that popped up just big were mercury and fluoride. And these are what are called xenobiotics. They're poisons. There's no known use for any of those materials in the human body, and they poison everything that they touch. So we've heard from, I think, 18 different experts in fluoride over the last 20-some-odd years. We've conducted research. We did a risk assessment here in San Diego back in 1998, and you'd love the minimum risk level. It was about 1/1000th of what is found in most water supplies, and everybody's going poo until this year. The National Academies of Science have said in the most emphatic way, with a unanimous vote, that the EPA's maximum contaminant level for fluoride is not safe. So if you not listen to that, it's like, for 20 years we've been out in the woods, and all of a sudden now we've got an expert committee from the National Academies of Science saying, no, that's not safe.
No.
It's time for the American people to stand up and say, we want water with our water. We don't want arsenic and lead and cadmium and fluoride, and that's basically what happens. Is when you add fluoride to the water, you're adding a hazardous waste material from the phosphate fertilizer industry, and that's stupid for one thing and dangerous for another. So,
well, what's interesting down here in Florida, if you can call it interesting, is the county where we're at. Everything down here in Florida is on a county basis, so you can't really go to your local water treatment plant. You can't go to your local, DPW, your local school board. So they do everything on a county-wide basis, and some people were clamoring for fluoride to be added into the water, and I kind of opposed that and wrote the commissioners. In fact, sent them other material that substantiated that fluoride was not good, and I sent them that block ad from the New York Times, which I also sent you, about how a consortium of doctors and dentists and doctors in 1962 were importuning New York City Council, do not fluoridate. It is a drug of mass medication. Now, what's interesting down here is it never got through because they told me it wasn't economically feasible. And I'm like, but you're not telling me it's because it's bad. You guys don't get it, do you? But anyway, the other thing is Florida was notorious for its phosphate industries. So we kind of, many of us might have gotten dosed in a sense, not so much on the county water, but on well water, I would assume, before they clamped down the phosphate industry back in the mid-'80s.
It was early 70s, but also through the air. Anybody that lives near a concrete plant, a brick plant, any metal smelters, any welders that are, the flux, anything you see that's spelled FLUO, flux, like the flux for your welding torches and all that stuff, there's fluoride in that. So one of the things that happens to welders is they end up with arthritis after a number of years. And what is that? fluoride in a joint. Fluoride causes arthritis. That's what it does. It accumulates in the bones and joints and destroys the way the joints and the ligaments work. So we got 60 million Americans with arthritis today, and it goes up every year, and it's just ridiculous. We're exposing babies to this is from the National Academy of Science thing that Kathy Tyson did the wrote the chapter on endocrine. Endocrine, for people who don't know, are the glands that function in your body, the thyroid gland and the pineal gland and so forth. And she showed both the pineal gland and the thyroid gland are damaged by the level of fluoride in the water that is allegedly beneficial. Well, hey, it's either damaging or it's beneficial. It's not both. So that's it's just a big lie that it's good to ingest fluoride. If you go to the Journal of the American Dental Association in 2000, there was a 13-page cover article by John Featherstone, and he detailed out how fluoride works and to reduce the caries attack and tooth decay. And it works topically, like sunblock. You would think I was an idiot if I was sitting out on that nice sunny beach there in Florida drinking my sunblock. I'd say, well, I have a systemic effect from this sunblock. You'd say, you're an idiot. Well, we're idiots because we're putting a topical poison into the water for a systemic effect when there is none. And that what there is a no benefit. The systemic effect is cancer, hip fracture, dental fluorosis, neurological impairment, and most recently they've linked it to a rare form of bone cancer in young boys called osteosarcoma. And there was a number of papers back in the 90s showing that the rats drinking the fluoridated water had a rare form of bone cancer. And so our government in its wisdom gave Chester Douglas, I think it was $1.2 million to look at whether or not this was happening in humans. Well, first off, you don't give a dentist a bunch of money to look at bone cancer, because no dentist in the United States is licensed to treat or diagnose bone cancer unless they have the cancer of the jaw. And these are long bones. So one, they've got the wrong person studying it. Two, he's the editor of the Journal for Dentists for Colgate. So he's a biased individual. He's getting money from Colgate, and he's getting money from the government to see if the product that Colgate sells is perhaps linked to a devastating bone cancer. Most of the children have a really tough time surviving bone cancer, and that's because it often breaks off and metastasizes. So, this is absolutely the wrong person to do it. And he came up with an abstract and says, no, there's no connection. His graduate student, Elise Basson, redid the study, but this time, instead of including old men and old women and so forth, she said, well, it didn't seem to be causing cancer in old men and women. Let's just look at the young boys. And there was a 6-fold increase. And so that she got her PhD, and then Douglas hid her PhD thesis in the Rare Books and Papers Library at Harvard, and then went on to tell 3 different groups that there was no link to fluoride and bone cancer. And Harvard investigated that a little, and didn't even ask the accusers. The environmental work group accused him of fraud. Scientific fraud is what he was accused of. And so Harvard put together a little kangaroo court, and they said, nope, he's okay. He was just it's just a subset. Well, yeah, men are a subset of the population, I suppose, but that's not a reason for going around saying there was no link. That would be there's only a link to half the population.
Right. What I want to do now is tell folks, if you're looking around for the information Dr. Kennedy has amassed, you can go to a website, and it's keepersofthewell.org. Now, in between the words, insert a dash, that is keepers-of-the-well.org. Now, I'm on that page now, Doc, and if people wanted to go and get a primer, more or less, if that's possible, about the fluoride situation, which one of these links on the introduction page would you suggest first?
I'd look at the summary. This is the Keepers of the Well is a web page that's devoted to the 2000 or the 1999-2001 congressional investigation of fluoride. Ken Calvert and a couple other people helped us with a whole series of questions, and that when we, like you were saying in Florida, the argument has been, we're just adjusting a natural substance. So, and we said, no, if you put it in the water, it's a drug. Oh, no, it's not a drug. So the first question came up, is fluoride, when it's added to the public drinking water for the purpose of preventing tooth decay a drug? And we sent that question to the Food and Drug Administration. It took them 2 years to answer it, but when they answered it, they said, any substance used to prevent, treat, or ameliorate a disease of man or animal is a drug regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. So the next question was, well, have you ever approved any fluoride-containing substance intended to be ingested, like swallowed, for the purpose of preventing tooth decay? And they answered back as no. So, yes, it's a drug, and no, it's not approved. And they kind of left out the fact that they've already rejected 35 new drug applications for fluoride vitamins, which many parents are giving their children. That's not an FDA-approved product. And they also forgot to mention the fact that they said there was no new drug application on file. Well, how can they reject 35 and there's no new ones on file? Well, the reason is that they allowed those applications to be voluntarily withdrawn. But they said there was no evidence of benefit as prescribed or directed in the labeling. So they can look at the science. The science is there. It's not beneficial. But that doesn't mean that they're going to comply. You've got to say, well, how come the highest levels of the United States government are not following the laws? And that's the real question. The real question is, and I say there's 11 reasons for that. And it's money, 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 money.
Could you go back for a second, because I'd like to take a look at that information. You mentioned a journal article just a little while back. Can you give us the title of that periodical again and the author?
Yes, it's the Journal of the American Dental Association.
Okay.
And it's John Featherstone, F-E-A, and just like feather and stone. He wrote this article. It was a summary of his 20 years of research on the how fluoride works to prevent tooth decay. And the title of it is The Science and Practice of Caries Prevention. It was the Journal of the American Dental Association in July of 2000. Okay. Pages 887 through 899. And that's he went through in excruciating detail. What is that, 13 pages or so, 14 pages? He went in excruciating detail of exactly how it works. If you swallow it, it doesn't come out in the saliva sufficiently to have any impact. He mentioned the fact that if your enamel of your teeth is so high, one of the arguments was that, when the fluoride gets incorporated in the enamel, it makes the enamel stronger. Apparently that's not true. No. He said that even when the enamel is up to 1,000 parts per million, remember Crest toothpaste, for example, is 1,000 parts per million. So when the enamel of the tooth, the outer coating of the tooth, is exactly the same level of fluoride as the toothpaste you're brushing your tooth with, it had no measurable difference. So, how does it work then? Is that fluoride is a poison, and it inhibits the ability of the bacteria to survive. And so the bacteria that, happen to be living on the teeth, dissolving the enamel every time you eat sugar, good message for the audience, don't eat sugar. But anyway, when they're eating sugar and dissolving the teeth, that fluoride inhibits their ability to breathe. It makes it hard for them to conduct the processes of life. Well, there's nothing special about that, because fluoride inhibits the process of life on every biological system on the planet, and that's all the way from bacteria to human beings. Horses, dogs, every animal on the planet can be killed by fluoride.
I just want to throw an aside, and we had done a show. In fact, we've probably done 2 shows on a character by the name of Edward Bernays, who is called the first public relations person. This goes back to like the early 20s, and he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and kind of tapped his uncle for some of the work he was doing to use when he got back to the United States as a means of manipulating people for corporate gain.
Some people take the straight path in life. But at Arizona State University, we respect your twists and turns. They make our online students more driven to excel in their professional lives. That's why our personalized suite of services empowers you with innovative resources and staff that sticks with you. Make your next turn with one of our 300-plus programs at ASU, #1 in innovation for 9 consecutive years. Visit us at asuonline.asu.edu to learn more.
And I just want to let folks know, if you do remember that the show's an Edward Bernays, who's called the father of spin, guess who was involved with trying to sell fluoridation as being a good thing in the United States? It was good old Edward Bernays.
They've done a really good job.
He never failed, in fact, and that's we're the worst for it. One thing about the brittleness of bones and such, the wife of a partner of mine for this show, Doc, was a dental hygienist for some time. And we talked about this years after she left the profession. But when we brought this thing up about the fluoride and such, she had stated that she had always thought that instead of being a good thing, that she was seeing more brittleness, especially in older people's teeth, because of the fluoride situation. In fact, her instincts were correct, weren't they?
That's absolutely correct. And there's lots of studies now linking fluoride exposure to hip fracture. As anatomy goes, if you had a limb on a tree that comes out and then goes at a right angle, that where you can cleave that limb off the tree is where it makes that sharp bend. It's a joint, or and so that's what your hip looks like. Is that actually it's not your hip, it's the femur. The top of the femur comes up and then goes almost at a right angle into the hip socket. And that what happens is people are walking along and that they take a step and that hip breaks off. Well, that's because the tensile strength, that is the bone that requires the most tensile strength, and that when you take those bones and you begin to analyze them for fluoride content, that there's more fluoride in those bones if you live in a fluoridated community, almost a double or a triple. And that in animals, when you can't do these experiments in humans, but when in animals, when you dose them with fluoride, and then you take the little bones out and put them in a little machine to see whether or not they're stronger or weaker, is that putting fluoride in the animal's diet makes their bones weaker. So it's quite likely that the rash of hip fractures. Now, let me explain it. Hip fracture is a devastating disease to men and women of all ages, but if you're elderly, that it lays you up, and a lot of people just die from being put on their back. They get pneumonia and die, and so the cause of death would be pneumonia, but what caused them to be on their back was the fact they broke their hip. So that means fluoride's killing people.
Well, you also mentioned something, and I don't think this was contributory, but my father was a lifetime welder. Well, he only made it to 56, which is a year from where I find myself now. Kind of shocking, to be honest with you. There was this thing about welders drinking milk to counteract certain vapors. Is that pretty much a canard?
I didn't hear that. What?
I don't know if you've ever heard this, but welders were told to drink milk to counteract whatever poisonous gases.
That's what they told the workers at the nuclear plant where they were using fluoride to extract uranium. Was that they were told to drink lots of milk. The reason is very simple, is that the antidote to fluoride poisoning is calcium, magnesium, vitamin C, and selenium. And so what they were doing, they were poisoning the workers, but they were telling them, here, take this poison, take this antidote. Well, the antidote, as your father probably noticed, it's not perfect. You were mentioning Bernays a minute ago?
Yes, sir.
And he's quoted extensively in that excellent book by Christopher Bryson, and that I have a little quote right here for you, and that he said, selling fluoride was nothing, mere child's play, Bernays told Bryson. You can get practically any idea accepted, Bernays told him, if doctors are in favor and the public is willing to accept it, because a doctor is an authority figure. And most people, regardless of how much he knows or doesn't know, will accept the doctor's opinion.
Quite true, and that also gives you a kind of taste for Bernays', shall we say, disdain with we the little people.
If he's into making money and selling stuff.
And it doesn't matter what the downside. You also mentioned something which I thought was interesting, because look, I think you're giving kind of a light of hope out to people who have been involved in a fluoridated water situation for some time, and that is, if you can get off the stuff completely, detox, you can reverse whatever symptoms might be a manifestation of the fluoride poisoning?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
The symptoms that come from exposure as an adult are you can, I don't know if you can get rid of them, but you can mitigate them. And mitigate is a fancy word for make them less bad. And that that's if you can mitigate them. But if you are exposed in the womb as an infant, at least an animal study, and we don't have good studies on children, but in animal studies, those neurological impairment, she said it produced almost a hyperactive animal, that those were lifelong. So the bad news is that, if you poison the baby in the womb, you poison the baby in the womb. And the good news is if you poisoned yourself after you were on this planet, then, that you may be able to reverse that. We did a documentary. I have a whole series of documentaries that we produced that showed what happened to the people in China. There was natural fluoride in the well water in China, and it caused them to become crippled at the same level as is currently allowable in the United States, 4 parts per million. So the government of China went in there and drilled new wells that were extremely deep and went below the contaminated aquifer, and they found good water that was down below that. And we were there 20 years after this program had been underway, and we saw people that were terribly crippled, but were effusive in their thanks to the government because the new water had made it less painful. And they were just basically prisoners of pain in these racked human bodies, and they were bent over, and their arms wouldn't straighten out, and they couldn't lift their head up, or they couldn't put their hand on top of their head. But when the fluoride level went down, the pain diminished, and that's the thing. My sister, how you don't ever get any respect in your own family?
Yep.
My sister-in-law used to make fun of me because I back in the 70s, I wrote a prescription for my nieces and nephews to have prescription fluoride, and she never filled the prescription. But she also never quit drinking the tap water, and the tap water where she lives has got fluoride in it. And so I was stupid to write the prescription. She was not wise to be drinking the water, and so I was up there visiting recently, and they said, "Oh, we don't drink the water." And my brother Pat was making up some coffee, and he was using the tap water for it. And I said, "What do you think running that stuff through coffee does to fluoride?" And he's a chemical engineer. He said, "Well, that wouldn't remove it." And I said, "Right, I'll skip the coffee this morning." And so anyway, they finally got it and began to use bottled water for everything. And her bad back of some 20 years, she's been complaining. She's been taking Celebrex and all this stuff for her terrible low back pain. It went away. And that, she go like, "Whoa, look at that. This terrible back pain goes away." And I got news for her. If she drinks about a quart of fluoridated water, it'll come back. But that's the amazing thing is how slow people are to actually respond to this information. They think that they know, but they don't really know.
Well, they want to be told. Well, we'll go into this. I tell you what. Let's take this time to spend some time on the website and what materials you do have available and what information people can access.
Absolutely. So at Keepers of the Well, one of the important things you'll see there is Jeff Green. His email's right there in the lower front. Jeff and I have been working on this fluoride issue for almost I guess 10 years, more than 10 years. Mm-hmm. And Jeff has been instrumental in helping dozens and dozens of communities throughout the United States, and some states, keep fluoride out of the well, out of the water. Mm-hmm. And that's why he calls it Keepers of the Well. There's a poem on the front of it. It's about, if you were in a village and you saw somebody in the dark of night come in with a little black bottle of something, pour it in the well, you'd come out with a club. But these people putting the stuff in the well are wearing white suits, and they look like city council members, and that sort of stuff. So anyway, we passed a safe drinking water ordinance, and it says basically that nothing can be added to public water supply for the purpose of medicating the population that has not first been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for the full range of dose the public would experience. And furthermore, the actual substance may not contain contaminants that exceed the public health goal. And so, here's an ordinance that, that they say, well, that ordinance didn't contain the word fluoride. And they say, oh, that will destroy fluoridation. Well, how can that destroy fluoridation if it doesn't contain the word fluoride? Mm. And if the dentists were telling the truth, if the advocates for fluoridation were telling the truth, it would have no impact whatsoever. So it's a safe drinking water ordinance, and the only way they can put fluoride in your water is through the Police Powers Act. This went to the Supreme Court of 3 different states back in the 70s, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Texas. And the lower courts all determined that fluoride was a harmful substance. 2 of them determined that it caused an increase in cancer death rates. But when it got to the Supreme Court, they said governments must be able to govern, and they have the Police Powers Act of the Constitution. And so a government, an elected body, may put a substance in the water that causes adverse health effects if they deem it necessary. Now, that means, like a policeman can pull out his gun and squeeze off a little bit of lead at you if he deems it necessary, and that's called the Police Powers Act. And what this ordinance does, it gives the citizens exactly the same power, is that we have the police powers also. And so when they pass that ordinance, that means that the city certainly may fluoridate, but they have to harmonize the 2 laws. They have to fluoridate with a substance that matches the ordinance, and that means they must find some product that is FDA approved to be ingested. And we've already had this came out of the congressional investigation. We've already had a congressional investigation. The FDA has never approved any fluoride-containing substance intended to be ingested for the purpose of preventing or treating tooth decay. So it fails on that. The actual substance, the congressional investigation determined, had so much arsenic in it that it will cause an additional cancer of the bladder or lung per 1,000. That's just 2 cancers per 1,000 lifetime water users. So there's lots of contaminants in this. So all of a sudden, and it says for the full range of dose the users would experience. Well, the full range of dose, figure an infant, a 8-pound infant drinking 1 quart of water a day receives a dose of about 0.25 milligrams per kilogram. Kathy Thyssen in the National Academy of Science showed that 0.01. Now, for people that are not good on decimals, let me say that in terms of money, is that the baby that gets a quarter's worth of fluoride is injured by a penny's worth. And so you go, the full range of dose. So the baby's getting 25 times more fluoride than will harm an infant that has a deficient iodine diet. Well, there's a lot of malnourished children in this country. So, and iodine is missing from a lot of diets. And so it's easy to see how there's actually several roadblocks to fluoridation here. And that on this website, this is basically the website that we use to work with citizens and citizens action groups to bring them up to snuff on a number of things. And I was talking earlier about how fluoride works, and you can see the 4th item down on the webpage is effectiveness, and that has basically a discussion in some detail about John Featherstone's article. And then there's also an article about baby bottle tooth decay. That when they go to these city councils, they always show some baby that has a devastated mouth. Well, this is called baby bottle tooth decay because many mothers put babies to bed with a bottle of milk, or have them nurse all night, or put Coca-Cola in the bottle, or some soft drink, or juice. And so that's baby bottle tooth decay. Fluoride has no impact whatsoever on baby bottle tooth decay. But these are the pictures that the advocates for fluoride will come show at a city council meeting. It's deception. And then and other places, like the Russians used to make places like East Germany put fluoride in the water. And so when Russia left, Germany, none of Europe is fluoridated. The continent of Europe itself has almost no fluoride. A little natural fluoride down in Italy, and there's one experiment still going on in Spain. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of Europe has no fluoride, and it's against the law in Germany. So when East Germany and West Germany reunited, they have all these nice studies showing that tooth decay went down when they made the Russians leave, and the fluoride was removed from the water. Interesting, Russia never put it in their own water; they just put it in the Soviet bloc countries. So that's under effectiveness. There's just a ton of stuff here on this webpage, and it's a lot of reading and so forth. But one of the things that you see on the bottom there is Jeff Green's phone number. We have the only 800 number on fluoride in the United States. It's 800-SAVE-TEETH. It's 800-728-3833. But it's on the webpage. And basically, Jeff won't do it he was my management consultant back in the 70s. He's worked with dentists and chiropractors, physicians all over Southern California for years and years. And he took that great knowledge of organization and applied it to this problem. And what he'll do is he'll work with a citizens group and get you to work together. The biggest problem with fluoride fighters is they fight with each other. Stop that. This is about saving our country. You can't take your personal beliefs and set them aside for a little bit and then work in concert with each other to save our country. And so that's what he does. He teaches them to put their shoulder to the wheel. And you'd be surprised how just a few people can actually turn a great big wheel. Our scientific advisors are the scientists at the EPA. And when you say EPA, a lot of people, kind of have a negative connotation about the EPA because sometimes the EPA doesn't do what we'd like them to in protecting our society. Well, it's not the scientists. That's the bureaucrats. And the scientists actually formed a union so that they wouldn't be able to be forced to lie. And that's what was going on, is they were forcing scientists to falsify the data about fluoride. And so that was actually why the union was formed. Well, they're our scientific advisors. And so that's one of the ways we got the congressional hearing. Bill Hersey, senior vice president, he's teaching at the American University there. He's on sabbatical this year, but we work with these guys and been able to make a inroads, not at the government level, because money is what this is all about. But at the local level, at the consumer level, we've had a tremendous impact.
Also, I want to let people know that if they want to ask any questions of Dr. Kennedy, make any comments, they can do so. You know the drill, by email. Send it to Vyzygoth@hotmail.com. If you want to IM with MSN, it's Vyzygoth. With Yahoo, it's Viz1400. We got a couple coming along. But, Doc, isn't this also a case, and this is what I had said to my county commissioners, it's like, look, if people within the privacy of their own homes and dentist offices or whatever, if they want to apply fluoride, let them do it. It's a case of cool hand Luke. Don't be so good to me.
You're absolutely correct. And actually, that's the European approach. The advocates for fluoride say, well, Europe has fluoride. They have it in the toothpaste, and they have it in the salt. Well, that's true. I took some photographs when I was in France recently of the toothpaste. They have toothpaste with fluoride. They have toothpaste without fluoride. Go to your Vons or your local grocery store and try to take a picture of a toothpaste without fluoride. If you do, it'll be one for children. There are, thankfully now, a few toothpastes for children. Even Tom's of Maine, Tom's one time said he would never put that stuff in his toothpaste. Well, he went commercial and he put that stuff in the toothpaste. And he writes it up like, oh, it's the natural form of fluoride. No. The stuff in toothpaste all the same. It really doesn't make any difference where the fluoride comes from.
Mm-hmm.
You could take the fluoride off the welding flux that poisoned your dad, or you can take the fluoride off the fluorospar that was in the ground, or you can take the fluoride off of the pollution scrubbers, the phosphate mining industry. It's the same molecule. It's kind of like saying, a bullet's a bullet's a bullet. It don't make any difference where it comes from. So natural fluoride is just as bad as unnatural. Actually, the more molecules you hook it to, the worse it becomes in some ways. People don't realize that fluoride's everywhere. Like Cipro, which is an antibiotic, very effective against anthrax. Matter of fact, many of the postal workers who were exposed to anthrax a few years ago took Cipro for months and months and months and months. And guess what happened? They ended up with arthritis. Well, that's what happens when you take a lot of fluoride for months and months and months and months.
And you're saying the fluoride was in the Cipro?
Yeah. It's a fluoridated antibiotic. There's a lot of psychoactive drugs, like how about the kids that wanted to get skinny that took the fenfen and the fenfluramine? Well, when you see something like fenflur, fenfluramine, well, there's fluoride in that. And so they ended up with a bad heart. Well, fluoride will poison just about every system in the human body. So, it's not that it's not readily available through a dozen different things. And that's actually what Bernays and this whole thing was about, was to keep you from identifying all your sources of exposure to fluoride. Mm-hmm. It's pollution is what it is, and that it's coming out of the smokestacks, the chimneys, and that when you make them capture the fluoride out of the chimney, they end up with a product of the phosphate mining industry called hydrofluorosilicic acid. That's what's added to 91% of the water supplies in the United States is raw, untreated hazardous waste from the pollution scrubbers of the phosphate mining industry. And that, if you want water, or do you want hazardous waste with water? And, in a country that touts flouts its freedoms, it seems sort of bizarre that the Nazis at in your state government, it's not a federal law. It's promoted by the federal government. And matter of fact, the feds have a law, it's called the Safe Drinking Water Act, interestingly enough, that prohibits the federal government from making any law that would require a medication be added to the water supply. That's where Jeff got his idea for our local ordinance. That's actually a federal law. So all of these laws, putting fluoride in the water supply, are local laws. And that's because it's much easier to buy a local politician. But the money flows to Washington, D.C. also, because they've got it to get rid of. So they basically have $100 million a year ad program for fluoridation, and it's called the Center for Disease Control Dental Division. Here's an army of men and women who have devoted their entire career to lying to the American public, in my opinion, is that they have $100 million, and I could do some good with $100 million in this country. But what do? They spend it giving grants to water companies to buy hazardous waste and truck it from Florida. They give grants to cities and municipalities to install the fluoridation equipment. They give grants to public health departments to print up brochures to deceive the American public. There was a guy in Portland, Oregon, a number of years ago who took $48,000 grant, printed up a bunch of brochures about how good fluoride was, while the citizens of Portland were going to vote on the issue. Well, it's against the law for a federal government agency to get involved in local elections. But here this guy was doing that, and that's not unusual. And so a citizen sued him, and we have canceled checks where he had to pay a substantial portion of the money back. Well, what did the guy do? Well, he fled. He fled to California. And we were the least fluoridated state next to Oregon at the time. And then they managed to spread enough money around Sacramento that they passed the mandatory fluoridation bill. And that's really what got me started in this in 1995. And we've been blocking it up and down the state with our little ordinance. You can't put anything in there unless it's FDA approved for the full range of dose you might experience. And furthermore, it can't have contaminants that seed the public health goal. And they go, oh, but they're crooked. We passed that ordinance in Reading. We had all 50 of the chiropractors in Reading were on our side, plus a number of physicians and lots of citizens. And they basically circulated a petition, got it on the ballot, passed it, and then Jeff said, "Now go get the code for where it was entered in the municipal code." And so they went down to get it, and the city clerk said, "What? What code?" They said, "Well, you should have it in the city code." The city council told us not to do that. Yeah, really? And he said before he got home, his phone was ringing with 3 different people: the city clerk, the city manager, and the mayor were all calling him saying, "Oh, you don't really want that, do you? You don't have to have that." Yeah. And within the next week, they put it in the municipal code. They were just trying to cheat,
right? And
that's what these people are. They're a bunch of cheaters. And so, if you're a scumbag and you've got nothing to do with your life, go work for the Center for Disease Control, the Public Health Department, and promote fluoridation. Because you have to be totally convinced that you're like Renee's, that whatever you do that makes you money is a good thing.
Okay. Let me get to some of these questions if I could. Mind, Doc?
No, not at all.
Okay. I think this is going to have to be a point of clarification, and you'll understand when I read you the question. Someone wants to know if it's okay to use a topical on the children's teeth.
I prefer topical iodine myself. The trouble with children is they swallow it, and that everybody that's seen a small baby, if you put anything near their mouth, they start sucking, and that the ability to swallow is one that the infant is born with. And everybody's raised a kid knows that it's someplace in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 years old they learn how to spit, and so it says keep on the toothpaste tube. It says keep out of reach of children. I think that should be bad for sale. If the amount used in brushing is swallowed, and they say a pea-sized amount, so that's like the tip of your little finger, is swallowed, contact the Poison Control Center immediately. The reason that's on there is there were 10,000 calls a year to the Poison Control Center from parents who discovered their children were poisoned by fluoride in toothpaste. And that, there were probably 100,000 children a year poisoned that the parents couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. What does it make them do? It makes them throw up. They get sick, they get nauseated, they get goofy. So, is it okay to use topical fluoride? I say why. Is that you can kill these germs. These are germs. Okay, what causes tooth decay? Let's talk about what causes tooth decay. because she said her teeth grow sweaters at night. You run your tongue around and your teeth are all fuzzy. And then so if the scum is on the teeth, when they get sugar, it turns it to acid and eats a hole in the tooth. Well, the first thing to do is knock the scum off the teeth. So when you're using fluoridated toothpaste, you're trying to poison the scum. You can rub the scum off the teeth with a stick. So, you can get the scum off the teeth. So that's the first thing. If you have a problem with tooth decay, and it's actually on this Keepers of the Well website under baby bottle tooth decay, there was a study done in Puerto Rico where on babies that were likely to be devastated by baby bottle tooth decay, the nurse twice a month, this isn't brush every 24 hours, this is twice a month, she would take a little dab of povidone iodine and dab those four front teeth. These are little infants, and they got 4 teeth. They look like a little rabbit. And so she'd take a little dab of iodine and go dab, and say, see you in 2 weeks. And that had a tremendous impact. They used 4 different levels of fluoride. It had no impact whatsoever. So if you want to prevent tooth decay, why don't you use something that works, like salt and baking soda? Why baking soda? Baking soda neutralizes acid. The dissolution of the tooth is caused by acid. So, put some baking soda on, stop the acid. It's real simple.
Well, Doc, I was going to ask you this, because what we did is, I have fluoridated toothpaste in the house, and I use it because it takes scuff marks off linoleum and tile really well.
It'll also clean your aluminum wheels.
That's it. So much for that. But we use baking soda mixed in with what it's called a neutralizer gel and a little spearmint, and that's fine. We have somebody else that mentioned something, and I think this is an issue that we'll see rear its head again. Bill from Illinois had noticed that the bottled water companies were putting fluoride in their water. What I noticed was that Dannon in particular did this, and it seemed like it didn't really work well because Dannon yanked it maybe a month or 2 later. However, the powers that be made their rounds around the Today Show and, all those morning shows, and they always have some physician they drag out to say, we're going to have to fluoridate the water because the kids aren't getting enough. So I'm assuming there's going to be a regalvanization of efforts to put out fluoridated bottled water. This individual wants to know, and I think we already stated this, but found out that it was in the water that his child was drinking. They shut that down, and now he's wondering, can they reverse the effects for a child? You kind of touched that before in the first half hour, but could you give him a quick primer on saying how to detox the child?
Yeah, feed him lots of good water with no fluoride in it, and calcium, magnesium, and vitamin C. And, there are a lot of good spring waters that you can purchase. And the interesting thing about added fluoride to the water supply is that they have to label that if they add it to the water supply.
Right.
If it occurs naturally, they don't have to label it. And, in many parts of the country, you can go in and you can buy a product called Trinity water. Well, Trinity water has almost 4 parts per million fluoride in it. And in California, our maximum contaminant level is 2 parts per million. So what did the Trinity company do? They took the word water off their bottle, and it's called Trinity Natural Mineral Supplement. Well, I put arsenic in a bottle and sell it as a natural mineral supplement because there's no standard whatsoever on that. But I think that is just pure deception. And when you look at it, it has the dose on the side. It says 0.9 milligrams, and then it says in little teeny letters per serving. So that means in your nice normal liter of water, there's 3.7 milligrams. So that's deceptive advertising, and I think that some lawyer who has nothing better to do should go after him, because any parent that feeds their child natural mineral supplement Trinity on a regular basis, or Dannon fluoridated water, or Gerber's baby water on a fluoridated basis on a regular basis, is 66% of those children will have dental fluorosis. And that's based upon studies that the FDA used to reject fluoride supplements. One is Peebles. He did a study of children that were given the fluoride supplements, and 66% of the children had dental fluorosis. So, and that's at the alleged beneficial level. So, if they're using this water, they're going to be damaging the children's teeth. The bad news is that children with dental fluorosis are linked to lower IQ and poor performance in school. So here we are in America with a whole host of problems with school. The kid can't learn to read and write, and they have letters jumping around, turned upside down, and all this other stuff. That's all related to neurological impairment. Neurological impairment is a fancy word for brain damage. So We have substances in the water that are causing brain damage in the children. If that doesn't make people jump and get up and start waving the American flag, well, I guess the problem is actually coming from Washington, D.C. So, but that's what I've been doing. I'm a patriot, and I'm doing my level best to get the government out of your water supply.
Also, could you name a few water filter systems that you find effective?
Yes, I can, and I have to start off with the bad news. There's only two kinds of filters that will take fluoride out of the water. One is activated aluminum, and the other is the bone char. And both of those are hard to find, and the bone char tends to make the water taste a little bit like meat that's aged, and the activated alumina trades aluminum for fluoride.
No good.
Well, if you're in India, it's a whole lot better to be drinking a lot of aluminum. Actually, there's some studies showing that more aluminum is better than little of aluminum. So I don't think that anybody is going to be wanting to put a lot of aluminum in their water. Then how else do you get the water out? The most effective way to get fluoride, actually gets everything out of the water, is through a process called distillation. If you type in cheap water distillers on Google, you'll find there's a lot of places selling them. I would buy one that was all stainless steel. I don't like to run hot water through plastic because there's bad things about plastic too.
PCBs,
so, a stainless steel distiller or reverse osmosis will lower the level of fluoride. And I'm not a zero tolerance kind of guy. If you're not poisoned, if your joints still work and you can, you're limber and you're young and healthy and so forth, you probably don't need zero fluoride water. And so another way to get that water is through reverse osmosis. The trouble with reverse osmosis is that while it starts out a little cheaper than the distiller, it ends up being more expensive in the long run because you keep having to replace those membranes. And I had one lady, she said, "Oh, I don't have to worry about that. My dad put a reverse osmosis system in my kitchen sink, and so I use RO water for making soup and making coffee and drinking and so forth." And I said, "When did they change the filter?" And she said, "Filter?"
Didn't know.
When did he change the membrane, actually? And he said, "Membrane?" And I said, "When did he put it in there?" She said, "About 4 years ago." And I said, "Well, the membrane's been gone for 3.5 years. So the water still comes through, but it doesn't take anything out. So you need to get another piece of equipment with the RO, and it's called a TDS, a Total Dissolved Solid Meter. And so you continually check the water, and when it gets up to 50, you change the membrane. So that's the good news. And or you can buy bottled water. There's a lot of water companies that are very conscientious about the water they sell, and they will actually give you a complete list of all the contaminants. And for your listeners, let me tell you that because arsenic is in the non-detect level, does not mean it's not there. Is that the level that they can detect arsenic is like 50 times higher than the level, no, more than that. 4 parts per trillion is estimated to cause 1 cancer in a million. And that the detect level is somewhere around 50 parts per billion. That's a B word. So trillion versus billion. So anyway, I won't do the math, but anyway, they're not even close. So non-detect does not necessarily mean good water.
Also, don't we have kind of a more difficult situation than even drinking fluoride from the spigot, and that's what happens in the steam of a shower?
No, I hate to correct you, but it's the shower, the steam is chlorine is the problem. The fluorine doesn't come out in the steam, and that's why you have to distill it. Chlorine you can get out pretty easy. They're very similar. And the chlorine in the shower, when or your jacuzzi or your swimming pool will cause lung cancer and bladder cancer and prostate cancer. And so that's why the EPA has been forcing water companies to put chlorine in, because it's not enough business for the doctors, I guess. I don't know. But the chlorine comes out of the water fairly rapidly. So if you boil water, for example, that you can boil the chlorine right out. Unfortunately, with the fluorine stays in. So if you were going to make soup and you had started out with 1 milligram per liter and you put 2 liters of water in there to make your soup, and when you got through cooking that all day, it was down to 1 liter. Now you got 2 parts per million fluoride because the fluoride stayed in the water, and so it is really hard to get fluoride out of the water once it's put in there. And so that's the bad news. But the good news is that if you pass these ordinances, you can make the hazardous waste disposal companies leave your water supply alone.
All right. So, well, obviously, our situation down here, we're dealing with what they call chloramine. So then in the
That doesn't come out.
Huh?
Chloramine doesn't come out in in the air in your shower, and so you're just bathing in the it's called chloramine tea. It's the chlorine with an ammonia group hooked on the end. And that I've used that in my office for years to stop gum disease, and that it's what's called a Trojan horse. Is that one end of the molecule has an ammonia group, the other end has a chlorine group. Bacteria eat by absorbing what are called amino acids, and so they see that ammonia group that looks like the end of an amino acid, and they say, "Oh, let me have that," and it's like, "Oh, let's take in some hand grenades," and they all die. But when I was talking earlier about the children that they use povidone iodine, well, that's ammoniated iodine. And so the iodine looks like food to the bacteria. And people say, "Oh, I don't know what that is." And I say, "Yes, you do. If you've ever cut your hand and gone to the doctor's office or the emergency room, they take out this little orange swab and swab that skin with it. That is povidone iodine, and that will kill any germ within the next 60 seconds. It just all of a sudden that skin is sterile, and you can sew the edges back together."
All right, so let me get this straight then. In the steam of a shower, fluoride is not necessarily the problem, it's the chlorine.
It's the chlorine, and that's if your water supply is using chlorine, not chloramine tea. And the reason they've gone to chloramine tea or ammoniated chlorine is because it doesn't come out in the steam.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a bit ago, and I think you've already touched upon this, but people are going to hear these names pop up. And so just to basically address the situation, a lot of times somebody will complain or want to know about fluoride and such, and they'll go to the dentist and they'll say, "Well, let's say I'm using sodium," and he'll go, "Oh no, you got to use stannous fluoride." Both of these are equally as bad, are they not?
Yes, that's true, and that we used to use a lot of stannous fluoride, which is tin. Stannous is the Latin word for tin. So it's tin fluoride. It tended to turn to green, to gray, kind of a gray-green looking color. So that most of the toothpaste today have sodium fluoride. There's also a silver fluoride, which is horribly toxic. That's used in some places. So anything you hook to fluoride, it's just like our hand grenades we're putting in the water supply. Anything you hook to fluoride, the fluoride's the poison molecule. Sarin nerve gas, what is that? There's two molecules, and the poison is the fluoride. So you put something to make it absorbable, and although it absorbs rather rapidly, or target a particular organ. So your dentist, interestingly enough, that when you go to the dentist and the dentist says, "Oh, let's put a topical fluoride treatment on your teeth," that's not effective. Now, let me repeat that. That's not effective. Go back and read that John Featherstone article. He said it's the right amount of fluoride, the right time, the right place. And the levels that they're using in the dental office are enormous. They're 12,000, 15,000 parts per million. There's a lethal dose of fluoride to a small child in that little dab that they paint on the teeth. And that in my book, How to Save Your Teeth, I detailed the death of a child in a dental office for exactly that reason. That the child was given a topical fluoride treatment, and the hygienist handed him a little glass of water and turned away to talk to the other girl about doing her nails or something like that, and the kid swallowed it. What's a 3-year-old do when you hand him a glass of water? He drank it.
Right.
And that nobody ever instituted, IV calcium and Haagen-Dazs ice cream and all this other stuff, and the kid died of cardiac arrest about 3 or 4 hours later. So, and the dentist and the dental hygienist both testified in the malpractice trial they hadn't realized that fluoride was a poison. And the pathologist testified that they gave the kid enough to kill 3 kids. So, just say no to topical fluoride treatment. It's ineffective. If you want to use fluoride, use it in toothpaste form, and then really, really, really well spit out. And that's I wouldn't do that, but if you want to use it, do it.
Well,
and so what?
Let me just.
Molyneux did.
Okay.
She used the blood level of fluoride that a child has in a dental chair, and injected rats with fluoride to create that same blood level that were pregnant, and they produced permanently hyperactive offspring. So if a pregnant woman should happen to be in the dental chair, that she very likely will damage her offspring if we're similar to rats.
Also, wasn't there a case of a young child ingesting a tube of toothpaste and dying of fluoride poisoning?
Yeah, they do it all the time, but the cause of death is cardiac arrest.
Okay.
So they don't. Fluoride is so ubiquitous they can't determine what killed the kid.
Also, I've got a question which you may or may not be able to speak to, but it says, is it true that when you put any type of medication or supplement in liquid form to be held under the tongue, because that's the fastest way to assimilate it into the system? Is that true?
It's one of the fastest ways, yes. The floor of the mouth And so it doesn't have direct access to the bloodstream until it gets further digested. On the other hand, if it's an absorbable form, then you put it under your tongue, it goes right directly in the bloodstream. Lyndon Baines Johnson, there's many times where he would be, giving a lecture or telling us how good it was to fight in Vietnam or something, and start to have a cardiac problem.
Right.
He'd pop a little nitroglycerin tablet under his tongue, and nitro dilates the arteries in the heart, and he would recover from his syncope. So yes, the floor of the mouth is very absorbable, and you're absorbing it, and that's where the fluoride gets into the bloodstream of the child or the pregnant mother. They don't have to swallow it. It can just absorb right directly from the skin under the tongue.
This will be the last question we'll have time to ask you. But if I've got a couple emails from people saying they'd like to do something to mount some kind of information campaign, at least in the beginning with their local authorities, they can go to your website, can they not, Doc, and find a way of following a protocol to do such?
Yes, and also you can write to Jeff Green or call him on 800-728-3833. He'll tell you how to do it. And we use a lot of websites. Some of them are focused on fluoride, and what happens is when you go to fight about fluoride, you end up talking about the teeth. And so what Jeff did is he changed the subject. It's not about the children's teeth. You can use, like you said, you can use toothpaste, or you can use baking soda or salt. It has to be about the water supply. Mm-hmm. And so what the reason our safe drinking water ordinance has become so popular and is so effective is it changes the subject to one that everybody has already voted on, and that they voted with their wallets. And if you go look around and you see people walking down the street, what are they doing? They're carrying bottled water with them. Mm-hmm. That in California, half the water that's drunk in California for individuals is bottled water, and that includes the immigrants. Mexico knows. There's bad stuff down in Mexico in their water supply, so they buy bottled water here too. So bottled water, or they've already said we don't trust the public water supply. So when you pass an ordinance, when you suggest an ordinance that would keep the water supply for the purpose of providing water that is as pure as possible to the citizens, everybody comes out and says, yeah, I want that. I want to vote for that. We stopped in Mammoth Lakes on the way back from working in Washington State, and some people had called us, and I dropped the wheels, and we landed at Mammoth, and went to a little meeting in a little restaurant there, and about 6 people there at Mammoth said, well, we don't want this stuff to be added to our water supply. We told them about the safe drinking water ordinance. City council wouldn't pass it. They circulated, this is just 6 people, and it passed like 78% of the vote. So, they said, if what the dentist says is true, this will have no effect on fluoridation. However, it will have effect on your water, because it will not be contaminated with arsenic, lead, cadmium. And everybody said, yeah, that's what I want.
Dr. Kennedy, we have to go. We're out of time. The website is keepersofthewell.org. You can hit that from my website also, folks, if you want to do it the quick way. Dr. Kennedy, thanks very much for spending some time with us, and maybe we can also come back at another time to address mercury.
Anytime.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye now.